Welcome, everybody, to the very first Budtender Insights. We're so excited you're all here.
Yay! We're your hosts, the Chronic Gals. I'm Rileigh.
And I'm Ashleen. And together, we're two of the three founders of Take Root Training. Our third is Melissa. She's right here, so make sure you guys say hi to her over at our table.
And our goal with these Budtender Insights events is to create a space and community for the budtenders through education, networking, and spaces where your voices can actually be heard.
That's why we partnered with Toketivity to bring events like this to life. So thanks so much to Lisa for helping to make this happen.
Woo! And a huge thank you to Daydreamer for providing this amazing space so we could all come together. And we also want to shout out our other sponsors, The Exchange, the Cannabis Alliance, Royal Rose, who has a table right over here, Nug Nips, and Asterion Temple. Thank you all for supporting budtender education.
Around the room, make sure, I know most of you already have, but check out our sponsor tables and all of the activities. Take Root Training has set up lots of coloring stations at all the tables. It's just a little bit of something that you can do while you're listening to the conversation up here. You'll find not only our coloring books over here, there's one about terpenes and one about the ECS. You'll also find a freebie from our concentrates episode on some of these other tables over here. So it's just like extra information to help you learn about the topic that we're talking about and really like solidify it with some art. And don't forget to grab a hot drink or a sandwich from the food truck outside. Settle in, make yourself at home.
And to kick things off, we're turning it over to Lisa to share more about Toketivity Insights, an ongoing way to share your voice and shape the industry. Here you go,
Welcome,
Lisa.
Lisa.
Hi, everybody. It's so nice to see you. And hello, everybody watching on the podcast and listening. My name is Lisa Snyder. I'm the co-founder of Toketivity. We are a global community of cannabis consumers and folks in the industry that care really deeply about cannabis normalization and empowerment of our voices. So we've been around since 2017, and we've had a whole life cycle of lots of different things and went through a pandemic together, as we all did. And I've come out on the other side, and I'm working on a project called Toketivity Insights. It's a consumer feedback project that I really care really deeply about helping people in the industry, especially brands, like listen to the people. What do we like? What do we not like? Whether it's the taste, whether it's the packaging, whether it's the way it feels, whether the way it smokes, all of this, really these combined efforts to, all of the experiences that we have with cannabis, it really is a wide range of feelings and thoughts that we have. We don't just some people just smoke to get high, but other people have different experiences where, and your experience is important. And as budtenders, if you are a budtender, sharing about that experience with your consumers and the people that are listening to you is really important part of that as well. So come see me in the back. And I'm basically just doing this. It's kind of like a survey, but it's like an interactive survey. And I would really love your participation if you can. You don't have to give your name or anything like that, but it's just about sharing your thoughts and feelings so that the people in the industry can hear them. And that's my intention. And if you're listening at home, if you go to insights.toketivity.com, you can check it out for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. All right, now let's get into it. Tonight we're diving into something we see on all the shelves, but we don't always get the full story on. Concentrates.
From crystalline diamonds to gooey rosin, we're surrounded by concentrates every day, but how often do we really get to slow down and understand how they're all made?
We're breaking down what it takes to get those products onto your shelves, how different textures and labels tell a story, and how to translate all of that into better conversations with your customers.
So let's welcome our incredible guests. We have Demetre Janness, thank you, an extractor, the lead extractor at Sessions Extracts. Thank you so much for being here. And we also have Jeff Hickok, the team lead at High-End Marketplace in Vancouver, Washington.
Yay! So let's do a quick little intro about the panel. We'll start with you, Demetre. Please introduce yourself and your industry experience, and what is your favorite type of concentrate?
Yeah, so, well, my name's Demetre. I started in 2015 actually as a budtender, and slowly progressed all the way to this point, realizing that every level was more and more interesting to me. I even did sales, like everything, like every job except for being like an actual owner at this point. So, but as far as my favorite concentrate, I mean, even though I make BHO, I like hash rosin.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Batter.
And Jeff.
Hi, I'm Jeff. I've been growing since 2004. I've got my OMP license in 2009. I started extracting then. My buddy Gareth got a lottery license for Washington, so I came over to be the main lead there. Been doing that since 2014. Got my Department of Health certification as a medical cannabis consultant. I was one of the first ones certified by the state of Washington. I've been breeding cannabis since 2020. So yeah, I don't know. I try to know things, but there seems to be a lot to know.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the understatement
Yeah.
of the century. So before we dive into like all the different textures and terminology, I kind of just want to set a basis for how concentrates even get made in the first place, right? At like this most basic level, making concentrates involves 3 steps, right? You have your cannabis flower or your trim. You take that, you extract it or concentrate all the desirable compounds, the cannabinoids, the terpenes, and then you can, to do that, you can use a solvent or you can use a mechanical process, which I think we'll get into in a little bit here. And then you take that resulting oil and you can refine it and process that extract to remove unwanted materials or achieve the final texture that you want, whether that's shatter or sugar or rosin or sauce or anything else.
So now that we're on the same page, let's talk about the differences between a solvent and solventless extracts. Demetre, what types of solvents are used in different extraction processes?
Well, that's actually kind of a weird question because some people will have a different opinion on it's a polarizing question. Just because, I mean, if you were to Google is water a solvent, it's actually going to tell you it's a solvent.
Right.
But it's not a volatile solvent like some of the ones that we use in BHO, which is propane and butane and some other tanes, I guess you could say. But those are going to be your primary liquid or solvent-based materials. But ultimately, water would be considered in the marketing term solventless.
And that's what you're talking about, like making hash and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Why would customers want one or the other?
You know, I mean, personally, the way I think of it, it's going to be really the effects for each product is definitely going to give you something different. You're going to get more of the full-bodied plant experience from a hash rosin, but you're going to get a much richer terpene or THC value or with a BHO extraction. So ultimately, it's going to be the customer's deciding factor on which one is going to give them the desired effect that they want. Because even smoking flower is going to give you something different than all three of the other two there too as well, because you're now taking chlorophyll in with combustion, that method, whereas we're removing the chlorophylls and a lot of the fats and the lipids when we're processing material, which is part of the refining process.
And Jeff, if a customer comes in and they're asking about the difference between like a BHO and a rosin, what do you tell them?
Mostly the process that they that is undertake to make it. Again, using the solventless term, when in fact it is like mechanical separation is what you're doing with the with water. It tends, when you use the term solventless, it tends, for people who don't know concentrates, tend to lean that way because like, oh, butane didn't touch it, nothing touched it, none of the tanes touched it. So but all that stuff's purged out in the end anyways. They purge it all out through vacuum ovens and things like that. So yeah, but yeah, usually if they're unaware of concentrates, they tend to lean towards the solventless ones because it seems safer to them.
And do you have to just kind of like eyeball the customer on how much education that you're going to give?
It depends a lot on the customer because there are so many different walks of life that come through the cannabis dispensary door, from the group of college kids to the little old lady treating cancer to anything in between. So really the knowledge that the consumer has, like a lot will have a conception of what they know is right. And you kind of just have to let them be right. And, and they'll figure out what they like best as they hear other people telling them that rosin's better. But
My friend said.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but yeah, it is really person to person. It's really about kind of knowing your customer on a personal level to be able to determine what they're going to want or what kind of knowledge they want to hear from you.
Is there ever like a tell, like you can just like, okay, you definitely do not care about the education, but you maybe, okay.
100%. There's people that just, they know what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite's when people are just like, no THCA. I don't want anything with THCA in it. This flower's got THCA in it, and it's like, yeah, well, everything that's labeled THC has been done through a mathematical conversion from THCA. So
It's all starts as THCA. You can't get away from it.
Yep.
So is one cleaner than the other? Like is BHO or the tanes cleaner, or is rosin cleaner, or is it all just kind of like up to the process, or either one of you can?
In my opinion, it's up to the producer. The producer, you can get people who create very clean BHOs and very clean PHOs down to 0 parts per million, so nothing's left behind but cannabinoids and terpenes pretty much. Whereas you can have rosin that, a lot of the rosin, especially on big yields, pulling it from outdoors, you're going to have little particles and things that make it through. And so you can have, contaminated rosin, in my opinion. But yeah, so it could go either way.
It's so interesting because I feel like, at least when I was budtending, there was like a clear distinction between like, oh, the BHO is your cheap, crappy stuff. The rosin is your like high quality, top shelf stuff. But it's really so much more nuanced than that, right?
I think a lot of it comes down to the traditional market there. Access to being able to create extracts safely is definitely a challenge. So making hash rosin is something you can do in your garage without raising any flags or having to worry about anything other than spilling water. Everything else, there's a fine line to walk, right? Where you could make your whole block disappear. So when you have that aspect and you have people who are prideful with their work and their craft, and they actually pay special attention and detail towards their craft, they're going to demand a slightly higher price. And I feel that sometimes versus the numbers that appear with THC and all the other products, the craft is more of a concern for hash rosin. Was it paddle made? Was it made with a machine? Was it outdoor? Was it indoor? Was it no-till? It's all this craft stuff. So it's a lot more like a fine wine. So you're going to see a demand there with a different price point, and there's a different barrier of entry. And that's really what it comes down to. I mean, you got millions and millions of people drinking Coors Light, right? And they're just fine, and that's kind of BHO, it's every man's weed, and not everybody can have a fine bottle of cognac all the time, but they'll pick one up, or maybe one that looks like a nice one,
Yeah.
And I think that's really where it comes down to, what that demanded so much more of that price, because in that traditional market, you're like, well, dude, I spent a whole bunch of time making this. It's not like your BHO, so like it's $80 a gram, And that's where you're at. And oddly enough, a weird story from before that. A lot of this stuff got its price because it was a good way to transfer funds. Lots of glass blowers. You see like $10,000 glass rigs and stuff. They'll trade it for hash to someone who has hash, and they'll buy $10,000 worth of hash. So it's a good way to like move funds, and now all of a sudden that's where a value comes from. And that was actually probably more the original space with hash rosin was, oh, you spent time making this hash, I spent time making this glass. So there was a term, hash for glass.
Listen, I'm not mad at the idea of like concentrates as currency. Like
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of things
Yeah.
could, some barter systems could come back. I
Yeah.
like it.
Bring back the barter system. I like that.
Okay, so we asked ChatGPT to list the most popular textures, and this is what they come up. They like ChatGPT is a they. Here's what it came up with in no particular order. So there's live resin, there's live rosin, shatter, sugar wax, diamonds and sauce, batter, butter, crumble, and distillate. Just a quick question to the audience. Do you guys feel like those are the most kinds of textures that you see on your shelves?
And you sell the most of? A lot of head nodding.
A lot of nodding. Great. So, Demetre, how do you get some of these textures, some of these most popular textures?
Well, so like a lot of it comes down to the very basic level with BHO. It depends on the material going in and whether we're using nugs or trim material, or if it's a blend of the two, because one's going to have a lot more fats and lipids versus the other. And that's going to determine ultimately which way we're going to go from that point. And then we're going to look at how it pours out of the machine. If it looks really, really dry or something like that, then it might be more focused towards a batter or a crumble. Where if it's wet and it comes out wet naturally with our normal parameters, we don't have to do anything, we might want to make diamonds or something with that, because the wetter materials allow the THC crystals to actually bind easier, whereas the thicker, drier materials, it's like molasses, so those crystals don't want to form together as much. And so that'll make a big determination for the BHO side of things. And then as far as if I want to change that consistency, I can interrupt that process by looking at it. Once it's starting to crystal up, I can start to whip it up and add some heat and melt those crystals back in and make a batter.
I think that's really cool. I feel like it's kind of going back to the concept of fire in, fire out to me. But it's like whatever the weed wants to be is where you're going to take it. You're not trying to force it to be any one thing.
And some brands will.
Yeah.
They'll, and that's where you find your real budget stuff, and darker colors and things like that, where, again, I'm sure we'll talk about color later on. Yeah.
And Jeff, how do you guide your customers through all of the different texture options that you guys have? Like, how would you describe them to a customer? What do you say?
Well, oftentimes, up in Washington, fortunately, a lot of the stuff is everything is prepackaged.
Yeah.
So everybody's got a, terp batter, sugar crystals, whatever they want to do. Oftentimes it does take a little look to see if it matches their description. But yeah, there's just people, again, generally tell you what they want. If they want to go through the process of looking at different consistencies, then we start generally with shatter and work upwards, because shatter is one of the older formats, and then kind of explain the differences till you get to rosin, and kind of show them all the different rosin, because there's jam and there's cold cure and there's a couple other different styles for everything. So but yeah, it's mostly, again, the customer is going to tell you what the customer wants, and then it's kind of a matter of just figuring out what they're describing. I've noticed a lot of people don't like the saucier, terpier ones just because they're harder to work with. And also, and again, being prepackaged, oftentimes if they come shipped wrong, because we can't vertically integrate in Washington, so everything's shipped to us. And yeah, you get a box upside down or something like that, and all that saucy rosin, or all that saucy BHO or terp sauce is just ruined.
It's the worst to get it flipped
really
upside
is.
down,
Yeah.
and there's just oil on the lid. You're like,
Yeah.
how do I get this out?
And
Yeah.
it can be as simple as the delivery person putting the box on the table upside down.
Oh
And so
my
then it's like, okay, there's 30 grams of rosin, or God, I keep saying rosin, but hydrocarbon extracts. It's just ruined, and then
Yeah.
there's no recovering it really. But yeah, that's why a lot of people, I've noticed a lot of shops tend to veer away from the saucy stuff because of that reason, at least in Washington. So,
Is there anything you would recommend a beginner does not try? Like if someone's just starting dabbing for the first time?
not dabbing at 1,000,000 degrees. It would be the thing I would recommend. Yeah. Cold starting your dab would be what I would recommend to have a good first dabbing experience.
Water.
Yeah. So yeah, and then it's kind of being able to find what profiles they like. If they're already consumers of cannabis and they know what kind of varieties they like, then you can kind of help match those varieties. Because oftentimes you'll get blends where it's like they just come up with a crazy name because they took 2 different ones of their strains and shot them together. But yeah. Well.
And as experienced concentrate users, do you have any fun ways you like to use concentrates? Like, for example, when I was getting shatter all the time, I would like roll it out into a little robe and then twist it around my joint, and then I'd have like a twax joint. And I thought that was so fun. Like, do you have any suggestions or recommendations for things like that? Either one of you?
There's always fun stuff to do. And that's why I always recommend people make their own hash, because when you have lots of hash, you get to do lots of fun stuff with hash. Make a tie stick, or make bong, or there's 1,000,001 things you can do with hash. So I am a big advocate of everybody growing and making their own hash. So.
Love that.
So, fun tip that I learned, because we were talking about the sauce getting all lost in the jar and having it hard to get out. So long ago, I came up with this idea that I call the straw technique. And you take a plastic straw and you can scrape every square inch of the jar till it's damn near clean, and it'll go inside the straw, and you just squeeze it all out of the straw onto your dab tool.
Ooh, like toothpaste.
Yep.
Love that.
Works
Love
awesome.
that.
Hot tip.
We need that in this economy. I always feel like there's like at least a dab left on the jar.
You start to have contests with you're like, I bet you this is going to get like a good worm in that straw.
I'm going to have to try that. Make a video. So traditionally, the cannabis plant is cut down. The branches are hung to dry, which allows the active compounds and the terpenes to fully mature and for the flower to dry out. And there's right now this huge trend over the last few years where branches are being cut down and then flash frozen. So the terpenes and the cannabinoids are like stuck as they are. And that's like the live label. So Jeff, why would someone want a cured product over a live product in concentrate specifically?
Cured over live?
Yes.
Well,
Or vice versa.
Or yeah.
Well, it can go either way. So, I mean, there was a study, Dr. El Sahole, he's one of the guys who did most of the cannabis studies because he was the one who was running that lab in University of Mississippi for decades. He released a study that said 31% of the monoterpenes gas off in the first 7 days of drying. And so the monoterpenes, not the more stable sesqua or diterpenes, the monoterpenes are going to be what are much more volatile. And when the plant is curing or desiccating, it's basically what it's doing is desiccating. It's pulsing water and removing moisture and bringing moisture in, creates enzymatic heat that releases those terpenes. And so that's where we lose a lot of the monoterpenes. So what ends up happening is when you process live material, the live material is going to have those terpenes and maybe even some thiol, which is really what we're trying to capture, right? Yeah. So but if you can capture, the reason somebody maybe would want a cured one is because you gas off those terpenes. Those terpenes will then give you a higher cannabinoid number. And it doesn't necessarily mean there's more cannabinoids in it. Mm-hmm. It just means, and this is when we come down to like the numbers and the testing, and the reason like testing doesn't really give us an accurate portrayal is because, okay, I gassed all those terpenes off, so my cannabinoid number now is higher, or the percentage is higher, not the overall content. So that is why I think somebody would want one, is because they're like, oh, well, that one has a higher number, is one of the main reasons. But As to whether it's a better product is debatable, because with the lack of monoterpene profiles, you're going to have a higher sesquiterpene profile. The sesquiterpenes won't gas off. So the sesquiterpenes will be what remains. And some of them, like linalool and, any of the ones with the ool at the end are alcohols, and those ones are very volatile. So when someone says a strain is high in linalool, when was it harvested and when did you test it and how much linalool is left in it? Probably very little. But again, it depends, and there's lots of ways people can protect them. Like when you look at flour, people nitro-pack things to try and preserve it. But what ends up happening, though, with the nitro-pack is that after you've opened it, for whatever reason, it tends to degrade much quicker. And so it's just a matter of trying to figure out which profile you're seeking. Are you seeking the monoterpene profile? Are you seeking a sesquiterpene profile? Or are you just shopping on numbers? And so it depends on what you're looking for. Again.
Yeah, as always.
Yeah.
It depends.
That is so interesting.
Well, another thing about the numbers too, there's literally no oversight over labs in almost any state, so the numbers are
20 different ways. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot more oversight at the bottle drop than there is at a testing facility. So yeah.
Unfortunately.
So Demetre, how does the cure process or lack thereof, we kind of did talk about this, impact flavor and customer experience?
Yeah, I mean, another thing that's pretty different about the fresh frozen versus the cured too are the fats and lipid contents as well too. You'll notice that's kind of like a thing that I don't think a lot of people have really discussed too much, especially since we're vaporizing all of these things, like cholesterol in our health and our body and stuff. If you were to vaporize butter, I don't think that's really good for you either. So those things are kind of in there as well too. So that's why you'll have things like distillates and such as well too, because they're isolated forms of those cannabinoids that are specifically seeked out, that won't change things like foods, nutritional facts and things like that, because those things aren't going to be integrated. But again, fats and lipids, carriers for THC as well too. So you'll see that the edibles that you have with hash rosin in them usually are pretty effective in comparison to, say, like a distillate edible, and that's the bioavailability there. So that's going to have a big factor when it comes to your edibles versus even your extract contents.
That's really interesting. Do you guys have a preference over live versus cured concentrates?
No, not
Do you
really.
feel
No.
that is there like a feeling difference? When you experience when you consume it, and then the feeling. Do you feel different?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
There's a
Love it.
There's a noticeable profile difference I've noticed between the live and the cured. Whether one's better or not is debatable. I mean, a lot of people will argue that the live aspects that you've been protecting are lost the moment you put it on a hot plate and squish it. But like I've said, there is a noticeable difference in the profiles. So something's not being lost on the plates, or something's being preserved through the process. What it is, I couldn't tell you, but yeah, there is a distinguishable difference between the two. And yeah, no.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So when I'm buying concentrates, and in Oregon, they'll open the jar and show me, I'll choose one strain, and then they'll open 2 jars, and I get to choose a jar. Or in Washington, they'll show me, the options. What am I supposed to be looking for as a customer? Am I supposed to be looking at the color? Are there impurities that I'm supposed to be looking at? Should I choose the clearer one?
You want to look at the harvest date and the made on date, and that's the most important thing.
Yep.
Yes.
Because the older it is, all those numbers again start to deteriorate. I mean, it might be great. I mean, you might find some really old weed full of CBN, right? And you're trying to sleep, that'd be great for you. that's usually why where you get this guy who's had his old big bag of weed forever and he's just been smoking it. It feels great, right? You know, and you smoke it, you're like, I didn't even get high off that. But he's all like, yeah, my bones feel great from this stuff. You know? And that's why, you know. So there's different things that are going to be there. But I really honestly, yeah, the age of the weed is the most important thing, because even the testing date, that's kind of like a recycle thing in Oregon that a lot of people don't know is if you retest something, it can go back on the shelf for a whole nother year.
Oh,
Wow.
And dispensaries, wholesales, anyone's allowed to retest product.
Wow.
interesting.
What question am I trying to figure out? How would you distinguish one over the other? Is it just like
It's that harvest date.
it's the harvest date?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you'll see something that's literally been harvested in like 2020, and it'll be like, oh, but then the made on date is last month, and the testing date is last month.
Yeah.
So it's been sitting there forever.
I did just pick up a joint. Harvest date 2023.
Yeah. So-
And I put it back. I was like, I'm not smoking that right
Yeah.
now. That's going to make me go to bed. That's not what I'm looking for. Jeff, do you have anything to add?
When inspecting flower, well, I get
Concentrates, yeah.
Yeah, concentrates, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, again, there's no way to smell anything in Washington.
Right.
Everything's sealed and delivered. So it is a lot looking. Also, Washington allows CRC, so a lot of people can disguise their poop soup as golden butter. But yeah, it really is just kind of knowing the process and we're really strict what goes on our menu. So we go inspect all our grows and all our processing facilities to make sure everything meets our standards before it is allowed to even be on the menu. So that's a lot of our customer base, because we have something like 65 or 70% is medical. So we have a lot of people from legacy markets and stuff like that coming to us, and they trust us for being able to know what's good and what's not good. And yeah, it's really about a clean facility and being able to process clean flower. Pesticides are, they're lipophilic, they'll transfer right over into your extracts. You got to be very careful about where your products are being sourced from. So, but yeah, as to what to look for, I mean, in Washington, you gotta trust your budtender. Like, you really do, because with CRC, you're able to hide it. So, yeah.
I was going to ask, is there a way for people to know if it's a CRC? Is there like a COA thing, or is this just like,
It's
I don't
unnaturally
think so.
white.
Yeah. Look at those diamonds.
I mean,
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting thing, because there's multiple medias, and all these medias will do different things. So some of them will strip color, some of them will strip things like heavy metals or pesticides. Some will actually just act as an actual just filter for fats and lipids. And that's actually probably the most common one that you're going to see. Even with places that say we don't use CRC, they're probably saying they don't use CRC to remediate the color or strip anything out. You're still going to have some stripping with that. But ultimately, by trying to remove those fats and lipids with some different higher end medias, you're going to get a better product for the banger. That's what's going to give you a lot less chazzing in there, because those fats and lipids aren't vaporizing instantly at a high temperature. And then also cartridges. If a company's making their cartridges properly, they're well refined, and they don't have as much of those impurities to them, and you won't get that burning flavor, because those fats and lipids aren't going to get caught on the atomizer and the cotton and just sit there and cook over and over and over as well too.
Gross.
We had somebody on the concentrate episode of our show from last year talk about how they got hit in the eye with a popping CRC, and she can go blind.
She didn't go blind, but it did hit her
It
eye.
was injury.
Yeah.
And yeah, it seems a little dangerous.
Well, and even that was probably more the extract itself, because I mean, you can eat CRC. It's sand. It's clay and sand. It all comes from the ground. In fact, Oregon is probably one of the largest producers of these types of materials because of the type of ground we have. So it's mined right out of the ground and then put into a truck, dried, and sold. But it's innate, like it's not going to do anything to you. Even if you tried to melt it, like you got to get pretty high up in the sand, in the levels to start melting glass sand, right? And some other things. So with that situation, it was probably real early on when everyone knew about CRC and stuff, and there's a good chance there probably was just something in that oil. It could have even been moisture. If you get water in your banger or on your dab tool and you take a dab, it's going to pop. That water is going to boil real quick, and it could have been something as simple as even that.
Interesting.
So do we like CRC, or is that something that we should want to avoid?
You're going to find out from your brand. If your brand is not the most craft inspired, very anti-transparent with what they're doing, chances are they're probably using CRC as well, but they're also sweeping the floor at the end of the night and taking that dustpan and dumping it in the machine too with all the floor scrubs. Just because it fell out in the process of putting it in the machine, so it's good too, right? All your weed came out of dirt.
Yes.
But no, you'll find a lot of companies that still use that for things like remediating just the fats and lipids and stuff. It's not something to worry about, I think. And as long as it's not like ice white, and stuff like that, which you can tell, and the smell, like if there's no flavor left in it, absolutely, they went just right to it to make it high potency and look good, and it probably was never going to look good to begin with.
So before we move on, let's talk about the colors of things, because we kind of touched on it, but I want to go a little bit deeper. So ice white, not good.
Yeah, not unless you're buying like THCA
CA.
products, like diamonds or something like that. But if it's a batter or a sugar sauce and it's just white and it's milky white clear terps too, then chances are you're probably getting a really budget product.
And then how dark is too dark on the scale of brown or to yellow to brown?
I don't know this color, but that's it.
That's too dark.
Yeah.
Okay. And
because
then
even I did a poll on my Instagram, and there's quite a few people on there, but it was 3 different shades of color, and honestly, the one without any CRC or anything was not the best picked, but the one with the standard process was the one, which was a gold amber color, obviously, and then there was the one that had a lot of CRC, and everyone was like, no. But so people are looking for a specific range of color in my mind when they're shopping, and it's usually like an amber gold, or all the way down to like a honey color, right? Anything that would look good in a honey jar is probably going to be what a customer's looking for. But that's not to say that some of the darker stuff, like we were talking earlier about temple balls, some of those are really, really dark. But once you get into them, you start to realize, oh, this is just a really good cured product.
Jeff, do you have any thoughts to add on the CRC stuff?
On CRC, I find them to be terp traps. So they mostly, it seems to just capture terps. So you lower the quality when you push it through. The only reason, in my opinion, you would ever really use CRC, and again, Demetre's right. There's, it's inert material. It's clay. It's silica gel. It's just different inert things you're pushing it through. But people do use them to remove pesticides, which would be the only reason. But then again, you probably shouldn't be using flour with pesticides in it to push through your column. So yeah, I'm not big on the CRC. In regards to color and the way people look at it, like the darker oils is generally a sign of older terps. So if you have cured material, like if you're curing flour and stuff like that, that stuff will often have darker terps that come out of it. And it's mostly just because those terpenes have oxidized. Most of the sesquiterps are isomers and they convert to caryophyllene oxide. So a lot of those will be very dominant in that particular terpene. But it's kind of a sign as to the age of the terpenes that you're dealing with and whether it was cured or live material. But yeah, But that doesn't, I mean, you can process it wrong and just make it dark as hell. And it's usually not a thing you see too often anymore, but yeah. Can't go, maybe not. I don't know. I'm not in the lab every day anymore, man. Yeah, it's just, so, yeah.
I've seen some things.
Just shake your head.
So one thing that somebody brought up a little bit earlier is the temps of the dabs. Like temps can make or break a dab, and I feel like a lot of customers, like the beginning customers that we were talking about, they don't realize that flavor loss or even coughing fits are really temp related. Demetre, can you tell us a little bit about how dabbing temperature like impacts the experience?
Oh man, if you don't want to lose your hair, you should stop doing high temperature dabs. That's for sure, because that's how we all got here. Yeah, like he said, cold starts honestly are kind of the way to go. Really, I mean, at least for my first one, like my first dab of the day, I'll usually do a cold start. Then I'll go and do a more moderate. I'm in the 480 range. 480 to 500. Like, there's usually a big puddle in the banger, and I guess I'm wasting it to taste it, I guess, if you say it that way. But, yeah, high temperature dabs, they're not going to just mess up the flavor profile, but it's carcinogenic. You're going to have problems with your lungs and your the phlegmy thing that happens, which I don't think I have anymore. I think I lost all of it. So.
And Jeff, how about you? How do you talk about dabbing temperatures with customers?
Well, I mean, the industry seems to be, or the consumer seems to be shifting to things like the Puffco, like pre-programmed things that cold start for you, and cold start to program temperatures. Makes it really easy and convenient for people who don't want to get a whole glass set up with a torch. Or, e-nail was the standard for a long time, and yeah, 480, like 450 to 500 is kind of the ideal range there. You carb cap it. You always carb cap it because the carb cap creates a vacuum or a partial vacuum, which will lower the boiling temperature of your oil. And so if you do that, that will allow better flavor, theoretically. And then one of the other major things is the cold start actually releases more compounds than if you were to flash dab it. So if you flash dab it, a lot of those super volatile compounds will just immediately be destroyed. Whereas if you warm it up, the vapor releases the compounds before they have a chance to be destroyed as it reaches temperature. And so you get a more diverse phytochemical profile by cold starting. But yeah, a lot of, like you said, waste it to taste it, but it's worth it, and just make sure to Q-tip that out.
For sure.
Well, now everyone's got the dunk tanks.
Right, little ISO stations, yeah.
Careful with those, though. I've definitely seen some fires there, too, with the torches. So that's why it's like another thing where I was like, oh, yeah, the torch and all that. Like, I don't really even use my torch all that much anymore. I'm constantly using the Puffco, and if I can't bring that with me, I'm like, crap, what am I going to do?
Do you guys think things like the Puffco and e-rigs are worth the investment?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I hear yeses from the audience.
They're very convenient, and actually that's kind of the realm where you don't want to not invest in quality. Mm-hmm. Like if you invest some off-brand one or something, chances are the battery's going to die on you in 6 months. So it's important to go with a good brand. High Five is a good brand if you don't like Puffco. But yeah, there's a few others out there. So.
I just got a Puffco Proxy, and I love it. I'm like, how did I go this long dabbing and not get an e-nail or anything? I could just lay in bed and get high, and that's just my dream all the time. So
not sponsored, but open to it.
Yes. Alrighty, everybody. We've covered a lot, but we want to hear from you all. If you have any questions about textures or literally anything we've talked about today, maybe make a line or raise your hand or something. If nobody has any questions, we do have questions from Instagram. So maybe we'll do Instagram questions first, and then if anyone has any questions, you can raise your hand and we'll meet in the middle or something. So the first question is, what's the difference between extracts and concentrates?
Cool. Actually, my friend My friend Jim told me, he's like, make sure you go up there and tell him the difference between extracts and concentrates. So
Good.
that probably came from him. But I was like, shoot, I didn't even know enough on my own, and that's actually kind of an interesting thing, so I had to look into it a little bit. But so concentrates obviously and extracts are going to be different, and it is exactly what it sounds like, right? So an extract is a pure extract of something absolutely as it is, and a concentrate is a reduced form of that same thing. So at least that was my understanding of it. So an extract would be like the oil that you then put into the tincture, and that would then be the concentrate, or vice versa, one of the two. He might actually be better at this than I am, but I'm really happy the question got asked because that had to happen.
That's so funny. Yeah, Jeff, any thoughts?
Yeah. So it kind of comes back to our solvent and solventless conversation again. I consider them to be concentrated extracts or hash concentrates. And so basically what you think about when you're using propane or pentane or whatever you're dumping onto your biomass, you are actually dissolving everything that's in there. You're dissolving all the trichomes, you're pulling compounds from the flower and everything else that's in there, versus when you are using a concentrate or a hash concentrate, you are just collecting trichomes. You're trichome farming, you're coming down, you're pushing things together, concentrating them into a mass. And I mean, it's a practice that's been happening for thousands of years at this point, and we've got to the point of rosin being kind of the top rung of that. But yeah, it's a matter of thinking about the trichome and whether the trichome was dissolved and everything was pulled out of it, and then you purge down to just the chemicals that you want, or whether you're taking the trichome and you're pushing the trichome together into some sort of homogeneous mass. So
That makes sense.
That does make sense.
Extract versus concentrate. Okay, so the next question from Instagram: what cannabis sativa subspecies / sativa cultivar produces the best capitates for washing into bubble hash?
which cultivars? I've had really good luck with. Ice cream cake tends to dump very well. The capitate trichomes. So there's capitate sessile, there's bulbous trichomes, there's sicillus cares, there's a few other different kinds of trichomes. But the capitate stock trichomes are where we're going to find the majority of our cannabinoids. The majority of cannabinoids are what we are trying to capture. And so it is variety to variety, and you'll notice it when you start, especially when you're looking at rosins and hashes and stuff like that. You can see which ones dump. Georgia Pie dumps, like everyone buys Georgia Pie to make rosin with. It's like I said, I have really good luck with ice cream cake. I get it from Archive. They're great growers. It really is just kind of paying attention to kind of the rosin market to figure out which ones are dumping well.
Look at the menu at your local dispensary and see what everybody's selling. Yeah.
Exactly, because it's all comes in waves.
There was GMO for a while.
Yeah. Okay. So the third question is full melt or dry sift? That was the question. I'm going to add my own. What's the difference and what's your preference?
He's the hash guy.
You want to do it? Okay. It was dry melt and full sift, or full melt and dry sift.
Yeah.
Dry sift is, it's one of the most classic forms of hash that you would find out there. They call it keef in Morocco. We all call it keef now. It comes from the Arabic word for bliss, which is kith. Full melt. So full melt is a very refined bubble hash that you refine down to what we graded on between 1 and 6 stars. 6-star being that full melt hash. Theoretically, you should be able to dab it and nothing should be left behind in your banger. If you have some, please show it to me, because I find stuff that's close, but nothing that's perfect. And so, you've kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. Keef is a dry sift. Oftentimes now they tumble it with dry ice, or they do it in very cold rooms and like static cart it like across like a plane. But it really, I mean, keef is kind of the least refined form of hash, I would like to say, because you end up getting a lot of particulates and other plant matter in there, versus 6-star would be the most refined hash, or not even necessarily refined hash. It's just the most pure hash, so pure that you wouldn't want to press it to rosin. You would want to dab it as bubble hash. So
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, even that people they'll put it in parchment and just use the heat from their skin to melt those heads to make it a material that they can pick up with a dab tool instead of it just being the heads.
a hash flag.
Yeah, that's where the hash flag term came from. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Does anybody have any questions out there in the audience?
Yeah.
When you are growing, what can you do to improve your yield at either you're doing extract or concentrate? Can you do to help like in the growing process?
In the growing process? Well, I mean, growing's a whole nother animal, but growing is being very careful about what you do all the way through. I mean, myself, for mine, I tend to give them a little bud swell. Bud swell is a really high, very potent bat guano mixture, and it tends to work very well. I've had really good results with it. I've also heard people having good results with Terpinator to make them pop just a little bit more. But it's really about just feeding them right and being ready, and then also flushing at the end is really important for your extracts, especially. So, yeah. And also not spraying anything on your flower. Don't ever spray anything on your flower. Just throw it away. Get a new plant.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
What's your preferred percentage, clear to milky trichomes when it comes down to harvest?
I like to go early. I find there's a higher thiol and like indol kind of content. Like you get that. Like I trust my nose more than I trust my eyes when I'm harvesting. And again, so I do most of my stuff like personally these days. Like I haven't really done a lot of like commercial production since the OMMP days. So like 2014 or something like that. Most of my experience these days is on the medical side, and working with patients. But I lost my train of thought. I don't know where I was.
Clarity on trichomes.
Clarity on trichomes. Yes. Again, I trust my nose. So yeah, I usually when they start to turn is when I go. I don't go to amber. Like that's too late. That's too late. So yeah, you go when it smells right, in my opinion. And I mean, you do want to look at them. You don't want to not look at them, but smell like as they start to turn. Try to get the thiol. That's what you guys want. So.
Awesome. Any more questions? Fabulous. Okay, well, I think that's a really wonderful place to wrap up. You guys, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you to the audience here as well. And thank you again to our sponsors for making this event possible. Thank you, Daydreamer, for this amazing space. Thank you to the Exchange, the Cannabis Alliance, Royal Rose. Go visit over there. Nugnips, Anasterian Temple, and of course Toketivity. Thank you so much for partnering with us. We appreciate everyone's support in helping us build this space for budtenders.
And now that the panel is over, the social part can restart. So make sure you grab a drink or a snack outside, visit all the sponsor tables, check out our coloring books and our coloring sheets everywhere, swing by the Toketivity Insights corner to put your insights in, and hang out and let's chat and smoke.
Awesome. We'll be seshing over there, so come say hi. Thank you, guys.
Good job, guys. You can find us on Instagram at Take Root Training and ChronicGals_420. Be sure to follow us for updates on our upcoming online community for budtenders, and stay tuned for our next Budtender Insights event coming this spring.
Don't forget to subscribe to Talking Potheads wherever you get your podcasts. We've got a full episode on concentrates, plus lots more convos for curious budtenders.
Check out Sessions Extracts in Oregon dispensaries to try Demetre's work, and go visit Jeff at High End Marketplace in Vancouver.
Thanks again for being here. Keep learning.
And keep growing.